Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, July 31st. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 30 days, the game against Michigan in 121 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddleoh.com. All right, fall camp is here. August is tomorrow. There is a sure sign that Ohio State football right around the corner. A month with the first Ohio State football game just 1 day away. That first game, 30 days away. Fall camp starting today. There is a ton to talk about as we head into fall camp. We talked on yesterday's show about the things on offense we were most interested in seeing. Today, we're going to do defense. And if you want to talk some special teams, we can talk some special teams as well. We're going to be doing all that with our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. He said he was going to go on strike if he wasn't given the option to talk about Ohio State's not one, but two Australian punters. Tony, Let's start with people from North America. What are you most interested to see on the defensive side of the ball in fall camp?
Well, first, good day, mate. Thank you for having me here. This will be our first look at Beau Atkinson, who got to Ohio State after spring. So kind of interested in seeing how he looks compared to like size-wise. He's a big kid. Does he look big? Does he look slow? Those sorts of things. And I assume he's going to be mixing in with the ones and twos, like all veteran, like all five of those defensive ends will. But this is going to be our first look at him, see how well he moves. And again, there are no pads at this point, but still, we've not seen him yet. And so all we've seen is stuff from YouTube basically, and North Carolina game. So that's the first thing I'm thinking about is getting that baseline, and then okay, that's what he looks like today. What does it look like when he's even more comfortable and when the pads are on? I don't know that we'll get to see him with the pads are on before Texas, but that's one of the first things I'm thinking about is just getting to see him.
Yeah, I think of all the people who are expected to be significant contributors for this year's team, he's the only one we didn't get a real good close look at in the spring. You got freshmen who were coming in, and you had a couple guys who were banged up, but not necessarily guys who were really expected to be major players. He was a post-spring portal addition and a very, very big one. I'm interested in asking him about Bill Belichick and how that all went. I bet it went well because that's why he left. No, we'll maybe get a chance to ask him about that. But man, he was right at the top of my list as well, just because of all the people who are going to be probably playing significant roles this fall, he's probably the single biggest unknown, at least in terms of what we've seen in person. I don't know how much of a known you feel like Julian Sayin is or Lincoln Kienholz is, but in terms of just guys we have not seen, he is probably the one who is expected to play the biggest role this fall. So yeah, I think that's a good one. To me, once you get past that, I'm going to stay on the defensive line and say, what do things look like in the interior of that defensive line behind Caden McDonald and Edric Houston? Because that was coming out of the spring, the biggest question for Ohio State, and you sort of heard some encouraging rumblings about Will Smith Jr., about Jason Moore, maybe Tywone Malone. I want to see it. I want to see what it looks like, because that felt like coming out of spring, boy, if they could add someone in the portal, that would be a really good place to do it. And they couldn't do it. There wasn't the player that they were looking for in the portal, so they couldn't do it. So you have to make do with what you got on your roster. And you can absolutely see a ton of growth from guys between spring and fall camp. That happens all the time. But who's going to do it? Who is going to be the guy that takes that step? Because they need one or two guys to take that step. We're going to get to watch them without pads on. So, interior offensive line play and defensive line play is not going to be super mega physical the first couple days. But I'm going to be looking for any kind of hint in terms of how we're what order are guys, who's working with the twos, who's working with the threes, whatever, who's lined up where, has anyone shifted from three tech to nose or vice versa, just any kind of inkling in terms of what are they. You can get happy talked, but they will show you what they think. They'll tell you whatever they want to tell you, but they will show you what they think. I want them to show me what they think and is going on in the depth of that defensive line.
Yeah, and that was something similar that I have here, which is, will we see anything from Will Smith Jr.? Because that's a name that Ryan Day brought up unprompted at Big Ten Media Days, and it's a name that Sonny Styles brought up unprompted at Big Ten Media Days. And then also, this past week, he was one of the 3 dudes of the week in the Ohio State weight room. So that's always good when you're being recognized for the off-field stuff and on-field stuff. So that's is because if they can get him to not even just be a backup for Caden McDonald, because he played nose. I think he's played nose most of his career. He's not a big guy. He's getting bigger, clearly, but Larry Johnson doesn't really care about how big the nose tackle is. If he likes him and he's got this sort of quickness that he likes, I'll go ahead and put him there. And so can he be that number 2 guy and clearly be that number 2 guy? Because Tywone Malone, Jason Moore, they've both gotten some time at 3 tech, and we'll see if one of those 2 guys can clearly be the guy and get into that rotation. But as you said, they need somebody. And right now, the popular name is Will Smith. And I will say, none of the freshmen were brought up that I'm aware of this past week in Las Vegas at Big Ten Media Days. So not that that's a bad thing. It's just one of those things that if you're counting on that or waiting for that, it didn't happen. And sure, there's a long time to go between now and Texas, but it looks like it's going to have to be the older guys. Will Smith Jr., the older guy who's a 3rd-year guy now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you wouldn't expect a true freshman to be able to step in. We have certainly talked about guys who, if it's going to be someone, it might be this guy, but that can also be think about how long these guys have been at Ohio State. The amount of time that has elapsed since spring ball is almost as long as the amount of time they were here from when they arrived to the end of spring ball. And then the amount of time between now and the end of the season is almost that long again. So you can have relatively significant jumps between now and the start of the season, between now and the end of the season. So those guys may work themselves into the depth chart more, but you're right. This is one of these things where we can kind of read the tea leaves. If you ask about, hey, how is this guy by name doing? And you get an answer that's like, oh, good. That doesn't mean as much as if unprompted, you say, hey, who's looking good? And you hear the same name from multiple people. That was the Will Smith thing at Big Ten Media Days last week. So that's one of those things where you kind of go, okay, let me write this down, because this is generally an indicator that you are going to see a guy who's taken kind of that next step. So I'm going to be interested to see what that looks like on the field. So, all right, your turn.
How about this one? I want to see how Aaron Scott and Devin Sanchez hold up at corner. I think we'll see both of those guys mixing in with the ones. They did 1s and 2s in the spring and looked pretty decent. But does this become a situation where even out of camp, there is going to be a rotation where it's not just going to be Jermaine Matthews and Davison Igbinosun? Can one of these 2 guys make enough of a jump and get in there? Because I think in any normal year, like if these were your 2 starters, it'd be like, well, okay, we'll see how that goes and feel like things are going to get better as the season goes on. I think Devin Sanchez posted on Instagram, we talk about the 2 deep. He posted a picture of himself that said 1 deep, which I think that's tremendous. That's the cornerback confidence that you absolutely have to have, where it's just like, yeah, I am behind nobody. And for a true freshman, he's the prototype corner, but he's young. And so he's going to get older in fall camp. Let's see what he can do. And of course, Aaron Scott's not going to back down from anybody, and he's going to battle. So I'm looking forward to watching those 2 not just compete with them against each other, but competing against these really, really good Ohio State wide receivers.
Yeah, that's a good one. I had that one on my list as well, because we have seen true freshman corners play for Ohio State. Denzel Burke did it in 2021, stepped right onto campus and was, boom, starting day 1. That was a year where that was not good news. That was someone has to be the starting cornerback. And yeah, you don't want it to be a true freshman, but this is what we got. So he's the best option. So there you go. This year, you've got 2 guys outside who are relatively proven entities. And I know Davis Igbinosun triggers a certain response in a certain subset of the Ohio State fan base. I'm going to be fascinated to see how he looks this fall. But he had a pretty good season. He I think got a little bit of the JB Shugart's false starts thing, where everyone was looking for it. So there, every time it happened, it was like, oh, here we go again. And in a way that probably you wouldn't with other guys. And he also had one of the greatest plays of the season, that interception right before halftime at Penn State. And he played pretty darn well in the college football playoff and was not flagged, I think, in the last couple games. He played pretty well throughout the college football playoff. So, between him and Jermaine Matthews, who this is his first time as a real starter, but he was basically, considered more or less a starter last year as well. You feel like you got a pretty good sense that, okay, the baseline there is pretty good. So if they feel like an Aaron Scott and or a Devin Sanchez is at the spot where there's, at the point where there's not really a drop off from those guys who are the ones down to the guys who are the apparently also ones, then that's a really, really good sign. Sometimes starting a freshman at corner could be a bad sign. This year, if there aren't injuries, I think that would potentially be a very, very good sign for Ohio State that those, Devin Sanchez and or Aaron Scott, who obviously is not a freshman this year, that those guys would have taken that step up to be at that level. The other thing that I wanted to look at on defense, and this is probably a little bit obvious, we know Caleb Downs is going to be one of the safeties. Who else is going to be playing safety with them? Because you got a couple real good options, and you've got McLean back there, you got Hartford back there. Those are guys who maybe do some different stuff, which means you can potentially shift Caleb Downs from one safety position to another, or have him really mix up what he's doing and throw some, throw a monkey wrench into what the offense is thinking they're going to get. And you can also just, where do you think the ball is going to go? Caleb Downs can be there. He can be your guy in that spot. You think they're going to run the ball? Well, okay, he can be your box safety on this one. You think they're going to throw the ball deep? Well, you can be your deep safety on this one. You can kind of take him and put him where you think he will be most useful on that play. And with as good as he is, that is potentially a really, really useful tool for new defensive coordinator Matt Patricia.
I'm also interested to see if those three safeties all play together and you see Caleb Downs or Jalen McLean getting some time at nickel that way, or however they want to do it with the dime or whatever. But yeah, I'm interested to see, because that was one of the ones I had listed as well. Where is Caleb Downs lining up, and who is next to him this time, that time, the next time, the fourth time, and how much are Jalen McLean and Malik Hartford mixed in with the ones, and are they always at the same spot? Or are they moving around? And that gets tough to keep track of when you can't always tell necessarily where the hash is and who's the field and who's the boundary and things like that. So it gets moving pretty quickly. But yeah, I want to watch those guys. And the last thing I have here is something I'm looking forward to finding out and forward to seeing is the thing you don't expect. Like who just comes out of nowhere, who becomes like Jalen McLean last year, kind of in spring, like everybody was speaking really highly of him. So that sort of thing is somebody just come out and they are, well, now we need to factor him in and we need to talk about him, and not even a starter like Edric Houston, but just somebody kind of out of the blue where it's like, well, this is an addition. This is a September call-up. This is an August call-up, basically, because we weren't planning on it, but he's going to play his way into some sort of a rotation.
And that's a good one. That's a sort of evergreen standby where you go in thinking, oh, how many? Yeah, it feels like we know everything that's going to happen, and then there's always something that comes. Someone who plays their way into a bigger role, the positional change you don't see coming. Yeah, so we'll be watching all that stuff. We do, Tony. We should hit special teams. I'm going to do you the great favor. I'm going to take the kicking position for Ohio State and leave you, whatever else you'd want to talk about on special teams. Buckeyes, obviously, Jaden Fielding back after last season. He had the misses against Michigan, and I think that's all that anyone remembers about his season, other than maybe the national championship ceiling kick against Notre Dame. He was banged up during last season, so you figure he's going to be better this year. They also, this is something we've talked about, but I don't know how much people remember. They did bring in a transfer kicker, Jackson Corville, who was pretty darn good at Ball State before he came over to Ohio State. He was another post-spring addition, so we really didn't get a chance to see him this spring. So he will be another one that I'm interested to see. What does that kicking battle look like? Is this something where are they going to have a short kicker and a long kicker, where Corville has hit kicks longer than 50 yards, which Jaden Fielding has not in games? So is this going to be a short kicker, long kicker thing? Is it going to be a battle for the starting kicking position? See how that all plays out. But, Tony, anything else that you can think of in terms of special teams that you're maybe interested in seeing?
Consistency from Nick McClarty. Although to say consistency, if the punters are booting the ball, if they're inside and booting the ball like they should, it hits the rafters. So you don't really have any idea of how far or any hang time or anything like that. But when they're outside, let's see some consistency from him. we know all of the guys that are going to be like back there returning punts. They'll have 7 or 8 guys, but only really 2 or 3 of those guys are actually going to be in the mix come time to play the actual games. But I think we know what Joe McGuire is, and it's pretty steady. Let's see if Nick McClarty, because again, remember, he was going to be the starting punter until about the final week of camp last year. Ryan Day had said it, and then he wasn't. And so if it doesn't seem like he's that far off, and let's see if now he's ready to take it over.
Yeah, and this spring he talked about the fact that he just wasn't quite ready. He wasn't ready for the level of performance and the consistency of performance that you needed. I think the high end there is going to be higher than it is with Joe McGuire, but Joe McGuire, Ohio State wanted consistency. Joe McGuire gave them consistency, did a very nice job, and was everything they needed him to be last year. We'll see how the battle for the starting punting job goes this year, but it is, I think Nick McClarty, everyone has seen the video at this point of him kicking the ball out of the stadium in Australia, like literally kicking the ball out of the stadium. So, if you can do that consistently, boy, you become an absolute national legend in certain corners of the college football internet, but you got to be able to do it consistently. Otherwise you can't get on the field. So we will see that, and we'll see all the other stuff we talked about on yesterday's show, on today's show. That will all start today as we head out to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center Thursday morning to watch the Buckeyes fall practice number 1. We'll have a report immediately after the game, or after the practice. We'll have that will be tomorrow's morning show. You're going to get to hear all about an honest to goodness Ohio State football practice. Yes, fall camp finally here. And then we'll have a couple Buckeye weekly shows coming for you after Friday's show, or after Friday's practice, after Saturday's practice. Going to be a ton to talk about as we get a firsthand look at this year's Ohio State football team. They count down. We're like a month away from the start of the season. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to that a lot. There's going to be a lot to talk about over the next month. We would love to talk about it all with you at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where we have our whole team covering the Buckeyes. We got our recruiting experts. We got our X's and O's guys. We got a really fun and active board on the Huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. It is all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.